often do you walk into a grocery store today and you hear the term superfoods? I feel like every time I turn around in a grocery store, I hear, oh, check out this new superfood, or we need to be eating more superfoods. I hear health and fitness gurus talking about it all the time. In fact, in my local grocery store, there is an entire aisle dedicated to superfoods. Well, my guest today was really intrigued by this superfood phenomenon, and she wanted to know how these superfoods were not only affecting our bodies, but also how the growing of these superfoods was affecting the farmers.
Welcome to the Business with Purpose podcast. Welcome to the Business with Purpose podcast. Here's our host, Molly Stillman, our mom.
Welcome to Business with Purpose. I'm your host, Molly Stillman of stillbeingmolly.com, and this show is all about bringing you the stories behind the brands, companies, and small businesses that are changing the world. Each week, I interview an entrepreneur, a CEO, nonprofit director, community leader, or just an all-around amazing person who's trying to make a positive impact, not only with their personal life, but also with their career. My goal is to show you that no matter what you do for a living, you can make an impact wherever you are. My guest this week is Ann Shin. Ann is an award-winning director and producer known for beautiful, compelling documentary films, series, and innovative interactive projects. Her films and series have aired on CBC, TVO, HBO, ABC, CBC, the Documentary Channel, Discovery Channel, HGTV, History Channel, Slice, all over. Her latest documentary, The Superfood Chain, follows Ann as she meets farming families in Bolivia, Ethiopia, Philippines, and more that are affected by the superfood industry. This was a fascinating conversation. I learned so much, and I know that you are going to learn a lot too. Hey, real quick, I just wanted to say thank you guys for the kind comments and just how supportive you have been during this season of the coronavirus. And I just wanted to let you know that I am praying for you, that whatever you are going through right now, that we will get through this together. I know times are hard right now, but I pray that we come out on the other side of this stronger than ever before. As always, if you need me, if you need anything, just feel free to reach out on social media or via email. Now, without further ado, on to my conversation with Ann. Ann, welcome to the show. I'm so excited to have you on today.
Oh, thanks for having me on, Molly.
How are you?
I'm good. I'm really good. How are you?
I am fantastic. And I am really excited to chat with you because I am a huge fan of documentaries. And you are actually the second documentary filmmaker that I've had on the podcast. And in almost 190 episodes, or maybe it is over 190 at this point. It's a very small crowd, but I love talking to filmmakers and documentary filmmakers. And when I was reading about your latest documentary on superfoods, I was just like, okay, I need to talk to this person because I have so many questions. So I'm really excited. I'm really eager. And before we kind of get really diving deep into the conversation, I'm going to have you do what I have all my guests do, and that's give us the Ann 101. So tell us who you are and kind of how you got to where you are today and doing what you do.
Sure. Thanks. So I'm Ann Shin, and I'm a documentary filmmaker as well as a writer. I started out at CBC Radio, and I've been writing all my life, and I've always loved stories. And I started doing radio documentaries. So I was, a studio, just in studio working with people's clips and telling their stories with sound and music and creating soundscapes. And I loved it. And I realized I really want to make long form docs. And that's how I got into making film docs. But me personally, I grew up on a farm in Langley, BC. It was a mushroom farm. I was picking mushrooms as a kid to help out the family farm. And we had our own big vegetable garden, which was really verdant because we had mushroom manure that we put into the soil all the time. So we had giant vegetables. And, I live in Toronto now. And I was living in in a house where we had just had access to a patch of land and everything else was just parking lot. And so my daughter and I were trying to do this little garden, but I was really kind of concerned about where are we getting our foods. And that got me going on the journey that became a film about superfoods from around the world. But yeah, I've done other documentaries. I did one about 2 war vets from the Iran-Iraq War. That's called My Enemy, My Brother, and that was nominated for an Emmy and shortlisted for an Oscar. I followed North Korean defectors escaping from North Korea through China. That was called The Defector. And I've done a number of other films, including one about smart drugs and a whole range of things. I like to, I get, like many of us, we think about a lot of things in a day. And when something just sticks with me and I come back to it again and again, I find I want to delve into it further, and I start to develop and research a documentary around it.
Yeah, I'm that same type of person where if there's a particular topic that I'm interested in or I want to learn more about, like I am also just like, I want to research as much as I can, but I obviously am not a documentary filmmaker. So I just tend to interview people about those topics. But, I'm just really curious because I also have a background in radio, coincidentally. And I'm curious, when you said that you were doing these kind of radio documentaries and then you realized that you really wanted to do kind of long form documentaries. How did you make that transition from radio to film? Because obviously the mediums are similar in some aspects, but very different in others. And so kind of what was your first step in making that transition?
Well, I was always visually inclined as well. So that helps.
Yeah.
But I made the transition because I was a radio producer and I was basically doing current affairs on Metro Morning in Toronto, producer there. And it was not that difficult to go from current affairs and radio to being a current affairs producer in TV. You have to book interviewees and that kind of thing. So I transitioned to TV as a producer in that way, and slowly started to do my own pieces and pitching my own stories. And I think that it was really through a couple starts. I pitched a film at NFB, as well as I started working for production companies on documentary series, and ended up directing a documentary for the National Film Board called Western Eyes, which was about cosmetic surgery among Asians. It was a bit controversial about, creating a double fold in the eyelid to make the eyes bigger. And it was kind of a look into the different reasons why someone might choose to do that, and following a couple of women in Canada. And started working for a bunch of production companies. So then I was directing as a freelancer on a whole range of lifestyle series and doc series. And the lifestyle is, it's where a lot of people in the industry find it grind because it's so repetitive, and there's, you do series episode after episode, but you do get a lot of experience, get a lot of directing hours in those series formats.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's, the more kind of diverse experience that you end up having, and then that just kind of leads to one thing or another, and it just kind of builds on itself. And so I want to ask about the latest documentary that you have produced, and it's the Superfood Chain. And this, when I read the summary, I watched the trailer and began just reading more about this, I was fascinated. And I know that like kind of how you alluded to this during your introduction is, it kind of just started because you grew up on a farm, which is awesome. And then you wanted to start this garden with your daughter, and it just kind of grew from there. And so I'd love for you to just kind of, for those that are not familiar, give us sort of the introduction as to what this documentary is about and kind of some of the things that you've learned along the way.
Sure. So I go to health food stores and I like to buy things that are healthy. And I got to buying things that were marketed as superfoods. And I started to realize and notice how it seemed like every couple months there was a new superfood that was being introduced on the shelves. And, there are those who call themselves early adopters of technology, right? I would say I'm an early adopter of like food trends or just health food trends. And I started to question why there were so many superfoods being introduced to our grocery stores. And on the one hand, I thought, oh, it's cool. We get more access to really healthy foods from around the world. But on the other hand, I wondered, how does this impact the farmers who produce the superfoods? Because most of the superfoods are really age-old traditional crops that are, grown by farmers on a small scale. And suddenly they're introduced to an international market. I wondered how it affected the farmers. And I also wondered, I just wanted to get a sense of the whole footprint that it took to, for me to buy a packaged superfood off the shelf. So that got me exploring. I mean, the other thing too was I was serving up superfoods to my kids. So I was serving up, quinoa and things like that. And my youngest daughter would be like, where's it from? And I found I could name the country that I think that it came from, or I'd be like, I think quinoa is from South America. I know quinoa is from South America somewhere, but I didn't have anything else to tell her or why we were eating it I realized I was really divorced from one, where the food was coming from, but also how it's prepared, or there was no cultural significance to the food that I was feeding the kid. The only reason why I was feeding it was because I thought, it's supposed to be healthier for you. So these were some of the questions that I had in my mind that got me to start researching about superfoods in different countries and how it gets to our dinner plates.
Now, for people that maybe are not as early adopters of superfood trends or just food trends in general, how is a superfood defined?
Well, there will be in pop culture, like if an Oprah Winfrey or Gwyneth Paltrow would talk about something, they'd say that it's really healthy for you, that it may help combat diseases. They're known to be really super rich with nutrients or high in antioxidants, and in some way helps fight disease or helps you stay healthy. So they're packed with extra nutrients, I suppose, is one way to put it.
And the thing that you were really kind of finding along the way was that a lot of times this is just a marketing tactic. And, obviously in some cases, maybe it's true. Maybe some cases it's a marketing tactic, and it really reminds me very similar to kind of greenwashing. And I almost say that it could be a form of greenwashing. And, obviously for those listening that maybe don't know what greenwashing is, it's just sort of when a company will just put, oh, this is all natural or organic, but it's not certified organic. And it's just making the marketing or making the packaging, kind of packaging it up in a way that makes it look clean and organic and healthy or whatever. And it could be on food or beauty products or cleaning products, things like that. And so, what did you find when you began to research this? Is that the term superfood, is it really more of just a marketing tactic? Is it truer in some cases and not in others? What did you learn?
I think that the term superfood and the way that it's marketed leads people to believe it's really something better than what they can get in their own home or in their own communities, or better than other things that you buy in the grocery store or that you prepare for yourself. I think it's somewhat misleading. I mean, they are definitely nutrient rich, but it's not to say that you need to buy those foods. I mean, in a typical North American diet, we have access to a lot of nutrient rich foods. And so it's not crucial that we have this food that's extra high in protein because we have so many protein sources, or something that's high in antioxidants. I suppose that's always a good thing to consume, but there are so many different kinds of things that you can consume that are high in antioxidants. And I mean, a good example is kale, which is local and that's considered a superfood. And until it was called a superfood, it wasn't really that popular because it's a tough, cruciferous kind of leafy vegetable. Yeah. But once it was recognized as a superfood, it suddenly became much more popular. So I guess, cabbages are good. I mean, there's just tons of great vegetables and foods out there that if you have a balanced diet, you're going to be healthy, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
So in that way, the whole whole industry or the hype around superfoods can be a bit misleading. Like people might think they need to buy the superfood to be healthy, but in fact, no. Like there are extra nutrients in these foods, but there's tons of foods around us that are very nutritional.
Yeah, absolutely. It's just, sometimes I think we just overcomplicate nutrition. It's
Yes.
like
Yeah.
put a fruit, put a vegetable on your plate, put some lean meats. Like it doesn't have to be that hard.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Now, obviously this is a topic that I am particularly interested in and passionate about. And that's one of the reasons I started this whole podcast, was to really educate consumers in general on how our purchasing power really does affect the way, that things are made, and how we can use our purchasing power for good. And, to educate people on the fact that, your clothing is made by a person. It's not made by a robot. Like if there's a person sitting at a sewing machine making your shirt, making your jeans, all of the beauty products you buy, where are the ingredients sourced, all those kinds of things, and just getting consumers to begin to think about it. And a lot of times I have found over the years that for many people, it's just an out of sight, out of mind kind of situation where they don't think about what happens to their trash once they put it in a trash can. Like they don't think about the person that, sourced the cotton that was used to make their denim. It's an out of sight, out of mind. And so, but I think what has actually been at the forefront of this conversation in general over the past 10 to 15 years has been the food industry. And we've seen a big shift from, the food that I ate as a kid, which was a lot of like Dunkaroos and boxed mac and cheese. You know what I mean? Like just Anytizers and Yoo-hoo. And I mean, just the foods of the 90s, like kid cuisine. I mean, who remembers kid cuisine, with in the frozen food aisle. So, I mean, that was really popular in the 90s. And then all of a sudden everybody was like, oh, wait, that actually might be really terrible for you. And, oh, it might be, harming the food industry. And so there's been this shift in the past 10 to 15 years towards more organic, non-GMO and farm to fork foods and supporting local farmers and all those kinds of things. And so I think people are beginning to question more where their food comes from. But, I thought this was just so interesting because when I love going, shopping at a store like Sprouts or Whole Foods that are, healthier grocery stores. And so those stores in particular really do heavily market the packaged superfoods and all those kinds of things. And a lot of time the branding on it is, could be maybe misleading. And so you, in your research, you began to travel to a lot of these countries that farm some of these superfoods, Bolivia, Ethiopia, the Philippines, etc. And so I'd love for you to just kind of share, what are some of the things you learned along the way that maybe surprised you?
Well, we started this journey, my daughters and I, going to Bolivia to learn more about how quinoa is grown. And I was really surprised at how our consumption of it in North America affected local farmers in Bolivia. So it used to be that local Bolivians would grow it and it would be sold in the local markets, and some of it would be sold abroad, but most of it was consumed locally. As soon as, it became a big thing in North America, the demand went sky high and the farmers got really wealthy, which was good. But then the quinoa grain itself became too expensive for local Bolivians. So ironically, they were having pasta and shipping out their quinoa to North America. It caused a disruption in kind of like the sustainability of that food source for the local country. And then when the larger farms started getting established in Bolivia and other places, it started to change that market again. And I mean, I suppose this happens with all food crops that become like a mass food crop. United States, Canada, China started to produce quinoa as well. So then the quinoa prices really dropped. And so suddenly all the farmers that were benefiting from it in Bolivia, they had turned all their land over to farm quinoa. And then, the prices dropped. And so, which it happened over a matter of years. By the time me and my daughters went down to Bolivia, the local farmers were saying that quinoa prices were so low that they were getting more money for the heirloom potatoes that they were growing. So they had turned their crops over to the potatoes. And in Bolivia and in South America, there's, over 100 varieties of potatoes. It's really fascinating. So that was really eye-opening to me. And we talked to a mid-sized kind of company that grows and packages quinoa. And they were saying, when they built their company, it was profitable and manageable to create a company of their size, a mid-sized company, and ship quinoa abroad. But then when the quinoa prices fell because of global production, they're suddenly really struggling. So that was really interesting. It's kind of like the boom and the bust of a crop that we witnessed in just kind of exploring quinoa as a superfood.
That is fascinating. I would never have, to be honest, I just would never have even realized that could be a possibility with a food like that.
Yeah.
And so I'm curious, I always, every time I watch a documentary, especially one that maybe challenges a way of thinking or kind of educates me in, in something that, how do I, what do I do with this information? Because, I always go back to the Maya Angelou quote, like, when you know better, you do better. And so for you, as what are the things that you kind of took away from this that you have begun to implement maybe in your own family? And what was sort of your end goal in educating, people who view this documentary? How are they to kind of take the information and maybe begin to make positive change?
Right. The thing I really learned in this process was that we really do have an impact on farmers, no matter how packaged and mass-produced the item seems. It's like whatever you touch and you pick up and you buy, it does create a ripple effect. And so I really realized that something like quinoa that's fair trade is really, from a source, it's really worth buying that rather than something that's not fair trade. I mean, there are some issues around whether all fair trade organizations are really helpful or not. But when I look at some of the fair trade organizations in Bolivia and Philippines with, virgin coconut oil production or coconut water, I realized that the fair trade organizations do a lot. Like in Philippines, they provide local farmers with machines that help them dehusk the coconuts so that they can get them to the virgin coconut oil producers in a form that they'll purchase it, and the local farmers will make more money off that coconut than if they were just selling the coconut in the local market. And so without that fair trade organization, they wouldn't have had those machines. So I didn't realize that, like, fair trade organizations will do that. They'll also lobby for land rights for farmers. There's lots of traditional farmers around the world where land wasn't deeded in the way that it came to be, zoned and deeded in the latter 20th century in those countries. So farmers that whose families have lived and in their minds owned the land they lived on are suddenly being, miscegenated or being kicked off the lands by developers. And so fair trade organizations, some of them will even lobby for the farmers' rights. So it's a long-winded way of saying fair trade really works and is helpful. And that's something that I go out of my way to do, which is check labels. And if it's fair trade, I try to buy that. And also I try to buy locally because I realized there's a lot of great nutritional stuff around us. And the closer you are to the source of food, the lower the footprint, and the more meaningful the purchase is in some ways. Why not help the farmers around you and choose to eat the things that are being, grown around you rather than just what's packaged as a superfood from afar. This is not to say avoid superfoods or superfoods aren't good, but it just got me out of my habit of just kind of knee-jerk, reaching for what seems to be like the best thing just because of the way it's marketed. When we're busy, we're in the grocery stores, we just want to get like the most nutritional impact per purchase and we're just reaching for things willy-nilly, I realized you can be mindful about how you shop in the grocery store and have a positive impact on farmers near you and far away as well.
That is a great point. And, it's funny because I was actually thinking about this the other day, that I just kind of had one of those moments where I was like, man, things have changed. Because when I was in Sprouts the other day, just doing my family grocery shopping, I kid you not, there is an entire aisle now in my Sprouts for superfoods. Like it's labeled superfoods. And so I was like, I think that is very interesting, because that is definitely not something that was around when I was a kid.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's very interesting too. It's an indication of where we're at in society. Most of us in cities are dealing with pollution, hearing about friends or relatives getting diseases that are often related to pollution or awful lifestyle. And I think that I'm not surprised that Sprouts has an aisle devoted to superfoods now, because that's often why we look to superfoods. We think we want to not get sick. We want to fight off cancer or whatever. So we think about, well, maybe this will help. And so, it's an interesting indication of where we're at.
Yeah, absolutely. I am going to take a quick break from my conversation with Ann to share with you that the brand new Summer 2020 capsule collection from Seiko Designs has launched. This collection is the perfect expression of reclaiming our vision at Seiko Designs. Our minimalist floral design, Hide and Seek, which is my favorite, is a celebration of the hidden gems in our midst every day. We've reimagined and elevated the classic Ugandan paper bead jewelry to add a delicate and unique flair to your summer wardrobe. And the tiger lily pieces are amazing. They are inspired by the boldness of their namesake, and each of our bags are as eco-friendly as they are beautiful. As you continue about your days, we hope this collection reminds you to look for the miracles and to be fearlessly, boldly, and unapologetically you. To shop the incredible Summer 2020 collection, go to seikodesigns.com/Molly Stillman. That's SSEKO designs.com/Molly Stillman. Now back to my conversation with Ann. I love that you said to advocate for fair trade in food, because that is obviously one of my big passions is advocating for fair trade in general. I had the opportunity to be the keynote speaker at the Fair Trade Federation conference last year. And it was just so great just being around so many other people who are passionate about fair trade just like I am. And, it was great to meet, people from companies like Equal Exchange who are doing, fair trade chocolate and fair trade coffee and, all, fair trade seasonings and like companies like Serve. And, there's just, we're at a point, thankfully, where there is almost not a category of anything you buy anymore that there's not a fair trade option. And that just really makes me excited. And, I, in the past couple of years, have also just really tried to be aware of, okay, where is this chicken coming from? I mean, my husband and I, we are big, we are not vegetarians or vegans by any, I think it's amazing when people do that. We love meat. So, but, we started every year we buy every other year, we buy a cow from a local farmer. And, this beef farmer, he's an organic beef farmer, lives maybe an hour north of us. And he has been farming he is maybe in his late 70s now, Farmer VMAC. And he is like the quintessential beef farmer, but it's just really great to be able to know that, this beef that my family and I are eating is not just quality and it's, clean and it's the most delicious meat ever, but, we're supporting a local farmer. We've been to the farm. We've seen how everything is done there, and it's just really sustainable and it's really beautiful. And I just love being able to support local farmers like that. And so I echo all of your sentiments, because I think it is something that more and more people should be moving towards. And it takes baby steps. It's not, we can't overhaul everything we do overnight, but little by little progress really does add up in this area.
Yeah, I agree with you completely. Mm-hmm.
Okay. Well, Ann, before we transition to the get to know you round, if people are interested in seeing the Superfood Chain documentary or maybe any of the other documentaries that you have created, what's the best way for them to do that?
So there is a superfoodchain.com website, thesuperfoodchain.com, and there are links to view it there. It's also available on Amazon Prime, Google Play, and Vudu, and Tubi. So, yeah.
Nice. Awesome. And all of your other documentaries are there as well?
You should check out fathomfilm.ca.
Okay.
Fathomfilm.ca. And there are some films you can just stream off of that website as well, different documentaries.
Fantastic. Well, I will make sure for the listeners as well to include all of those links in the show notes. So you can access those on my blog, stillbeingmolly.com/podcast, or you can just wherever you are listening to this on your device, you can just kind of scroll up, and usually the show notes are right there at the bottom. And so you can access all of that directly there. So Ann, before we go, this is one of my favorite parts of the show where we just get to kind of ask some fun, lighthearted get to know you questions. So Ann, are you ready for the get to know you round?
Yes.
Awesome. All right. Question number 1. Of all of your pet peeves, we all have some pet peeves. Which one is maybe your strangest or most unique?
Dirty floors. Yeah. It's like, I like to go barefoot in the house. And I hate feeling anything dirty or gritty or sticky underfoot.
Yes.
So yeah, that's my pet peeve.
Yes. Actually, funny enough, my kids and I and my husband were out on our back deck over the weekend planting our seedlings because it's that time of year, planting seedlings. And my sweet kids, I mean, they're 6 and 4, so what do you expect? But they were just like tracking so much dirt in the house. And so I was like, okay, we have to vacuum and mop and do all the things because I can't stand like walking on. All of a sudden I'm like, oh, why is there like sand underneath of my feet? So
Funny, yeah.
I totally relate to that. Okay.
Yeah. Dirt.
Yes, exactly. Okay. So question number 2, in 40 years, what do you think people are going to be nostalgic for?
That's a great question. Yeah. Because I mean, my daughters don't even know what a dial phone is or a flop.
Yeah.
I got a floppy disk. We were moving offices and there was a floppy disk and my colleague, another producer, was like, "What is that?" Because I'm 50 and she's 30. I was like, "It's called a floppy disk." It's just another one of those. What will people be nostalgic for? That's a great question. I bet you. Oh, I don't even know. Maybe we come back to that. I think it's anything that you have to do, like manually.
Yeah.
Anything that has that's not digital.
I know. My husband and I were talking. So I'm pretty up on, tech news, but I'll be honest, I did not realize that Tesla had already released self-driving cars. Like I did not realize that this was a thing that people owned currently. Cause my husband was telling me about this guy that he knows that he is not like, he doesn't work with him, but I guess they're in a similar industry. And anyway, they were talking and the guy takes his self-driving car to work and like works in his car on his way to work. And I was like, wait, what? That's a thing? Like people do that? And he was like, yeah. I mean, people with a lot of money have these self-driving Teslas.
It's amazing. And then it's like no emissions either.
It's insane. And so then I got on this kick where I was reading. See, I tell you, when I learned something new, I'm like, okay, well, now I need to read all about this. So I was reading all about the self-driving Teslas and, it just was fascinating me. And then of course I told my kids about it and then they were like, what? They're cars that drive themselves? Like my kids were fascinated. And, and then I was reading about how like it's predicted, obviously we have no idea if this is ever going to actually happen, but they were predicting that, in whatever 50, 60 years, if everybody drove self-driving cars, then there would actually be potentially less accidents because cars would be interacting with like, you don't have necessarily like human error. Obviously, I'm sure that there's still some computer error, but they were talking about how there'd be like less accidents. And then so like what happens to insurance companies? And it was a very just fascinating begin to think about. And I was like, wow, I don't even know, like that kind of hurts my head to think about the fact that maybe one day
maybe people be nostalgic about actually having to drive a car.
Yeah.
To steer, put your hands on the steering wheel and drive it, and
I know.
put the brake pedals on, or have the decisions to make about that.
Yes, exactly. Well, it's, I mean, I'm even nostalgic about like the car I first drove when I started driving, because it was like a 1993 Ford Escort. It was manual transmission, and like it was a piece of junk, but like I loved that thing. It was my car when I turned 16, and it's I miss driving that clunker, and I don't know why.
Well, my partner owns a huge record store, and they sell a lot of turntables, and that's an interesting example there, where in an age of streaming music, people are buying records and record players because they want to go back to taking a record out of its sleeve, putting it on the turntable, and dropping the needle, and and
absolutely,
feeling the music.
Yes. I remember my mom had, so my mom was a child of the 50s and 60s, and, in early 70s, and she had an intense record collection. Like, she had the Beatles' Abbey Road, she had Thriller, she had Prince's Purple Rain, all on vinyl. And when I was a kid, I would just sit and play with her records for hours. And after she died, I don't know what happened to her record collection, but it still like makes me sad to think about the fact that I'm like, where did all those records go? I want those records, because today, I mean, people would die for those, like original Beatles vinyls and things like that. So okay, so this is the last question I'm going to ask, because it's the question I ask all my guests. And that is, Ann, what does it mean to you to run a business with purpose?
To run a business with purpose is where you're creating a community in the world that reflects the values you hope to kind of, reify into the world. So I work with women, and we all are very passionate about the projects we undertake. And so it's wonderful to be working in a community of women, and we're all kind of pursuing our dream. And so it's wonderful to be cultivating that environment and to work together with people like that, and to send out into the world the product of our visions. And so I feel really privileged and really happy that I get to spend my days with a bunch of cool, kick-ass women.
That's awesome. That is awesome. I think that is amazing. And thank you so much for coming on the show and sharing just your experience in documentary filmmaking and everything that you've learned. Thanks for answering all my questions. And
I really enjoyed this. It was great talking with you, Molly.
This was so much fun. So thank you so much. I know that it's, you have a really busy schedule. You're in LA right now. And so it's actually really early in the morning for you. And so I'm just really grateful for your expertise. And I can't wait to see all the other documentaries you continue to produce and how you impact the world in that way.
Thanks. We'll be in touch.
I'd love to know what you loved about this episode, or tell me something that you learned. If you do, let me know on social media. You can find me at Still Being Molly or at Business with Purpose Podcast on Instagram or Facebook. And don't forget to use that hashtag Business with Purpose Podcast. Thanks so much for listening to this week's episode. If you are a first-time listener, welcome. Be sure to check out the archives for past shows featuring so many amazing entrepreneurs who are literally changing the world with their businesses. And if you are one of my regulars, thank you for your support. Don't forget to head on over to Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen to podcasts to click that subscribe button to make sure that you never miss a new episode of the show. And while you're there, would you take a moment to leave a review? Leaving a review helps me to know what you're liking and how the show is personally impacting you. This show is produced by Third Wheel Media. Thanks so much for listening, and go do something good with purpose on purpose.
Now go do something good with purpose on purpose.